is, if I were to say to you, China is getting old before it gets rich, you might think, what the heck am I talking about? I'm actually quoting from the World Bank, in fact, from the opening workshop we had for the EU-China Social Protection Reform project, which started last year. And what we're talking about there is that in countries like China and several other ones which have done very well in East Asia and Southeast Asia as well, in rapidly developing on the basis of industrialization, the fact that you haven't had the wide expansion of social protection in terms of government expenditure on these programs that you see in the OECD countries means that you are at a risk of getting to a point where, as people get older, as your demographic dividend recedes behind you, you haven't carried people into a permanent increased prosperity. There are risks of falling back into poverty, and above all, there are risks to the economic transformation that you seek to continue to do, and in particular increasing consumption and so on. There are therefore huge needs in such a situation to rapidly ensure that the social protection measures in terms of pensions, in terms of access to health and so on, are brought up to a level where everyone does have access to them, and that is precisely what China's doing. Now, that's China, and China is not the model for every country in the world by any means. We have large areas of the world where we work in, where that kind of massive industrialization isn't taking place and isn't going to take place at anything like the pace it might need to if that was going to be the model for how we go forward in development. But what we do find is large young populations in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, and a massive basis of economies on informality. Economies are largely informal, whether urban or rural. So that's a huge challenge for social protection, because the way it's developed in the way we're familiar with has been always closely associated with work and on the basis of contribution systems largely, if you think about Europe. And we're now moving into a different scenario where we're talking about transfers which may be based on taxation, or largely at the moment they may be based on the contribution of donors, but they're not associated directly with work in the sense of people making contributions in order to have a benefit such as insurance against ill health and so on. So that is a huge challenge, because if you want to expand social protection, you're then going to be having to look for how do you do it, on what basis, what kind of taxation can pay for it. If people are informal, are they paying enough income tax for you to have a bigger tax take to use that as a basis, and so on and so forth. So these are the kind of things that are going to need to be thought about very seriously by the governments, which are right now with a lot of ambition, committing themselves to putting in place national social protection policies. One of the propositions that has been made is that there should be a global fund for social protection. And there is discussion about the extent to which to allow countries to get things started quite often. This would be a useful approach. Because even with a view to sustainability over the long term, which has to be based on countries being able to fund the social protection provision they make from within their own economies and within their own budgets, there is an argument for saying that to get things started, such a fund could play a part. What is definitely clear is that the extent to which a developing country can commit itself to full social protection for all its citizens is going to have to be something that they take forward with full consideration of their fiscal situation and how that's going to develop.